now as the suspended Chief Justice of Ghana, Gertrude Torkonuu, has escalated her legal challenge by filing an application at the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice in Abuja, Nigeria. Now, this move comes amid ongoing domestic proceedings related to her suspension and potential removal from office. Deputy Attorney General Justice Shamsai, who disclosed the Chief Justice's latest action, said the suit was filed on July 4, 2025, invoking claims of human rights violations arising from her suspicion that there has not been any fair application of the law. Now, Justice Torkonuu argues that her suspension essentially by President John Dramani Mahama under Article 146 of Ghana's 1992 Constitution amounts to a de facto removal without a final determination of the 3 petitions against her. She claims human rights violations, stating the suspension impairs her constitutional right to serve as Chief Justice. Prior to the ECOWAS filing, she had challenged her suspension in Ghana's Supreme Court and High Court, but her applications were dismissed. On July 1, 2025, the Attorney General filed a motion to strike out her judicial review application, calling it legally defective due to a grave misstatement of capacity and missing essential parties. Justice Torkonuu has denied accusations contained in the 3 petitions which allege, among other things, misconduct and misuse of public funds. Let's engage a private legal practitioner, Kweku Annan, who is a former director of the Ghana School of Law. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for having me on.
I want to first of all find out from you how this strikes you, the latest move by the suspended Chief Justice to, as it were, defend what she describes as her rights, and then also put some spotlight on the violation of her human rights as has been captured in this suit before the ECOWAS Court of Human Rights.
Thank you. I think that the Chief Justice is now holding on to just anything, that will come their way. The ECOWAS Community Court indeed has jurisdiction to hear cases bordering on violations of individual human rights. But the point is that the ECOWAS Community Court is a creature of the ECOWAS community, pursuant to their own protocols and treaties. And the first thing, presumptively, is that the ECOWAS Community Court will respect the laws of member states. And one of the laws, the member states, is respect for each other's sovereignty. Indeed, the Lady Chief Justice, may take cases, to any court, even, go to the World Court, the Hague, anywhere. But the primary question is, has she exhausted, all the internal mechanisms here in Ghana? This is something that I find very difficult to understand. She's a Chief Justice. She has to respect the Article 146 CJ removal process. If she herself is disrespecting, the Article 146 CJ removal process, how does she expect the ECOWAS Community Court to intervene? Because first of all, they may, like to find out whether there are any internal mechanisms in Ghana available. Are there remedies? Are there justiciable remedies? Now, this is a process that has been triggered under a constitution promulgated by the people, of Ghana for themselves, for the good governance of, the entire nation. She is the Chief Justice. And if she is not, prepared and willing to respect, own constitution, how does she expect ECOWAS, to intervene to protect her? I don't think that, the case is going to succeed. This is again one of the, cases with the dimmest prospect of success is doomed to failure, because the ECOWAS court, indeed, it's a well-respected international adjudicatory body. But if you look at, what it has done in the past, it has, not simply interfered, with the internal processes. It only assumes jurisdiction in clear cases of violation of human rights. Here, I can't find any, human rights violation, perpetrated against Chief Justice Torkonuu. I think once again, is a very bad approach.
I see, but you indicate that the ECOWAS court would take into consideration whether or not the person who was, as it were, brought the case before them has exhausted all internal avenues of redress.
Remedies, yes.
Now, would you say that the suspended Chief Justice has not exhausted all internal avenues of redress? And if she hasn't, which other avenues hasn't she explored as yet? Since she's taken her case to the Supreme Court ruled against her. So really, what other avenues again are we talking about?
Again, you see, the office of Chief Justice is not, an individual's personal property. So this matter is not a personal matter. This is a constitutional process. Article 146 has been triggered by virtue of the submission of petitions to His Excellency, the President of the Republic. In every step taken, the President has respected the Constitution and actually acted in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. There has been no clear case of violation of any human rights of a leadership Torkonuu. The President has not breached any rule. If anything at all, the President has observed, the framework, that the framers of the Constitution put in place, that if you receive a petition, these are the constitutional steps you should take. And on each pathway, you have to respect, the will of the people as enshrined in the Constitution. The President has done that. It is the Chief Justice who has created a condition of, rendering the process, impracticable. Today, she does this. Tomorrow, she goes to Abidjan. Another time, she'll go to Togo and this thing. So, if you create conditions, that, render it impossible, to hear the case, the case or the petitions brought before the committee set up by the President in consultation with the Council of State, then it is she who is, rendering, the pathway intractable, not the President, not the people of Ghana. So she must allow, the constitutional process already triggered by the President, pursuant to the submission of the petitions, to, go to completion. Once the processes are determined judicially in accordance, with the framework spelled out clearly in Article 146, then and only then can one determine whether human rights have been violated or not. The ECOWAS Community Court has, on a number of occasions, dismissed suits, filed by aggrieved persons. On, certain occasions, it has, allowed, suits. But in all these things, the question is, have you exhausted the internal remedies provided by your own law? And if you are preventing the internal remedies to be exhausted, how can you go to the ECOWAS Community Court? So there's nothing, very little the ECOWAS Community Court. I would not be surprised if it throws out the suits filed by leadership, Torkonuu. And let me again say this, that at the end of what is going on, the Chief Justice cannot, in good conscience, go back, to her office, even if the petitions, the petition fails, even if it is thrown out, she cannot go back, to her job.
We'll see how the coming days will look up, because you've described this application at the ECOWAS court having the dimmest prospect of success. We'll see how things play out. But I thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us as always.
Thank you.
Kweku Asare is a former director of the Ghana School of Law and also a private legal practitioner, sharing his thoughts with us. If you're just joining us, the suspended Chief Justice Gertrude has escalated her legal challenge by filing an application at the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice in Abuja, Nigeria. This move comes amid ongoing domestic proceedings related to her suspension and potential removal from office. The Deputy Attorney General, Justice Shamsai, who disclosed the CJ's latest action, said the suit was filed on July 4, 2025, invoking claims of human rights violations arising from her suspension. If you recall, prior to this moment, the Ghana Bar Association has also taken the position consistently calling for a review of the decision by the Council of State upon advice to the President to suspend the Chief Justice as per the dictates of Article 1466-10. But private legal practitioner Martin Bebo is of the view that the Ghana Bar Association should not be speaking through its president on this matter. Take a listen as to why he takes this position.
Data, we like vengeance, etc. In this context, it's difficult. It's difficult to rationalize, right? These are very serious matters. We should let due process go on. If they had said, the president should lift the petition, the suspension, and then let Chief Justice Torkonuu resign, right? Accept a resignation, notwithstanding the other Supreme Court decisions. That one, yes, I've said it time with that number, that if it's about making sure she gets a dignified exit, resignation, so that she can keep her benefits, that one I'll vote for it any day, okay? Because I think we've dragged this matter enough.
Exactly.
And if we don't stop at a point, you see that the general system will suffer more. You remember even in the Bible, before they got to Pontius Pilate, the high priest said, there is more wisdom in giving up Jesus Christ so that there will be peace in society, right? Because they didn't want any trouble with the Romans. So what I mean is that there's more wisdom now in giving her a dignified exit than to continue to fight this out. Because as we fight out, yes, the press conference Chief Justice Torkonuu gave would help with the future law reforms, etc. But overall, the fight, the high political temperature, etc., I don't think are worth it. Let's give her a dignified exit. Then she goes. Yes.
But does this position that the GBA takes consistently help in itself?
No, the GBA, right now, what the GBA is doing, GBA is losing credibility, fast declining in credibility.
Why do you say
this is a GBA that first issue, their first statement, do you readily have it? We can read from it. The first statement they gave on this matter, they said, yes, it's okay, let due process go on, and they stayed. And that was okay. It's good that they said, yes, let the thing be done under due process, right? Then they shifted, went and they didn't announce the media review conference well, and went and met a few lawyers, less than 60, voted to say the removal process is not good, all the unsavory things they did, that resolution. We came here and condemned it, but it tells you that they haven't learned. It looks like they are digging in their heels. The GBA is digging in their heels. It's not good. As an association, I expected, that's when we showed that Mrs. Ifuagati, you see people even brought pictures of her in MPP attire on an MPP platform with Joe Gatti, her husband. I thought that would have told her that, look, Ghanaians are watching. So even if it were anything, I even think that Mrs. Ifuagati should not be the person to give such a speech, because you see, it's very difficult for citizens to separate her from the MPP. So she should have even known the messenger. She's not the right messenger for this kind of message. Madam Efuagate, this speech, you shouldn't have read it. Let somebody who is not tied to the MPP openly. Yes, you may be MPP inside, right? So somebody who may be MPP inside, but once there isn't public, there are not enough facts to link the person. The message would have sunk in more. But once you are MPP, your husband is MPP, the moment you give such speeches, all people, discerning citizens, see is that they are trying to paint the government black for political ends. Madam Efuagate, let it be clear, I think this is the last time you should give a speech on this matter.
As Martin Pebo is a private legal practitioner.
It is clear that the reference to the murder of the judges by the suspended Chief Justice was not truthful. Because he claims that the SIB report, part of the SIB report, said that the planning of the murder took place in a Edu Lodge. There is nothing in the SIB report which says that the planning took place in a Edu Lodge. What is actually in the SIB report is that after the murders had been committed, when Amatekwe had been identified or was being identified as the master brain, Captain Chikata had a discussion with him in a car in front of Edu Lodge, in which Captain Chikata virtually urged him to be truthful and not to unnecessarily drag others into what he had done. That's what is in the report. Somehow, suspended Chief Justice can claim that the plot to execute the judges, to assassinate the judges, took place in Edu Lodge. That's false. I've already commented extensively about why even that claim she made shows the extent to which is unable to rise above prejudice rooted in family history, and therefore disqualifies her from the high position of Chief Justice. But today, that is not the purpose of the discussion. You understand? That's not the purpose of the discussion. As we speak, the Ghana Bar Association, or the leadership of the Ghana Bar Association, has not been able, as we speak, to point to one thing which has been done in this process, which is a violation of the 1992 Constitution. Nothing. It has not been able to point to one thing which is a violation of the 1992 Constitution. Indeed, all that they have suggested and their supporters have suggested is that President John Dramani Mahama should violate the 1992 Constitution. They are encouraging him to violate the 1992 Constitution. Last week, something significant happened. One of the politicians in this country, everybody wakes up one night and becomes a politician. And we, the journalists, we give them front page coverage and so on. You understand? And give them huge titles and so on. Especially if they can dress like my brother here. You know. And my brother, today you have dressed, Pao. You have dressed. But this politician actually went all the way to Kumasi, went into Manshia, and sent a petition to the Asante Hini, urging the Asante Hini to intervene in this matter. And I said, my goodness, he's gone gaga. Read Article 146. Why is this? How does the Asante Hini come into this matter? But that is the extent of their desperation. She went and told Asante to stop President Mahama. Stop President Mahama. He's following the constitution. Stop him. Look, everybody in Ghana, including the president, hold their positions, traditional or otherwise, on the basis of the constitution. Chieftaincy is what it is because it is recognized by the constitution of the Republic of Ghana and so on. So, no chief, big or small, giant or dwarf, can violate the constitution of Ghana or can urge anybody or influence anybody to violate the constitution of Ghana. I'm waiting to hear or to see any provision under Article 146 which has been violated by the president. Then we can begin to talk. But this appeal, false and reckless appeal to history, and so on, it won't wash. Do we want to abide by the 1992 Constitution or not? That's a very simple question. Okay? Now, here you have the suspended Chief Justice actually publicly claiming that the judiciary over which she presided, and listen very carefully, the judiciary over which she presided can be politically influenced. That's a serious statement. She's Chief Justice, she's only suspended, but she's Chief Justice. What has she seen in her life on the bench which suggests that the judiciary can be politically influenced? And if indeed the judiciary can be politically influenced, is that not the strongest reason for resetting the judiciary? So she makes the argument herself. She's making a very strong argument for resetting the judiciary. You understand? And as for the Ghana Bar Association, I don't know what to say. I have done a quality test of that resolution or statement which came out of their media review. And if you do a quality test, the result is very poor. We are told that there are about 8,000. Initially I said 5,000, but I've been corrected. That there are about 8,000 lawyers in Ghana, members of the Ghana Bar Association. 8,000. Less than 50 of them meet to pass a resolution. That's the quality. And that whole meeting was attended by less than 200 of the 8,000 members of the Ghana Bar Association. By the time they got to passing this resolution, more than half the attendees had left the meeting. That's the quality of the decision which was taken. You understand? So, whatever it is, what I wish is that we follow the Constitution, the letter and express provisions of the Constitution. Let's follow them. Let's make sure that the Chief Justice is treated fairly like any other citizen. She's entitled to counsel. She has counsel. And so on. She must be treated very, very fairly. Yeah. You know, her rights should not be violated at all. At the end of the day, the Article 146 committee will come up with its verdict, and its verdict indeed cannot be changed by the president. The president is enjoined by the Constitution to implement the verdict of that, So this red herrings, about whether or not the Chief Justice's husband is allowed to hold her hand while she appears before the committee and so on. And those are red herrings. I mean, let's discuss them. They are inconsequential. Once Charlotte Asare was appearing before the Article 146 committee, did she go with her husband? What is this? Let us continue following the Constitution. Even if we think that the Constitution is defective, there are ways of amending the Constitution. There are ways of amending. I think that there are many parts of the Constitution which are incongruous and so on. I mean, you cannot have a Constitution which describes Ghana as a secular state, and then in the very preamble, make references to God as the something. I mean, it's incongruous. You understand? But that is the Constitution we have. Fortunately, there's a Constitutional Review Committee, and I'm not saying that that Constitutional Review Committee is going to do magic. In fact, it can end up with recommendations which will make the Constitution a worse document than it is now. I don't know what it's going to come up with. But then, there are opportunities for making the Constitution better, and so on. Let us follow the Constitution, and at the end of the day, the Article 146 committee chaired by Justice Gabriel Puaman will make his decision known, and all of us will be enjoined to follow that decision. Finish. There is nothing in the world which does not have a historical dimension. And as Marxists say, history is a tool to the interpretation of phenomena. History is a tool to the understanding of current developments and so on. But distorted history only creates a distortion of our reality today. And it's within this context that I intend to analyze what is happening. Of course, all of us have had to run back to history following Justice, Her Lordship Justice Torkonuu's reference to a Lodge and what she falsely claims happened there more than 40 years ago. In revisiting that history, it is obvious that the NPP narrative is false. And the NPP narrative is simple. The current NDC springs from PNDC and AFRC. So the NDC as it is today is an inheritor of the legacies of the AFRC and the PNDC. And therefore, anything they do today can be interpreted using that history of the AFRC PNDC. That's the narrative. I will show how this narrative is excessively dangerous. But before then, the point I'd like to prove now is that all the existing political parties in Ghana, one way or the other, have roots in the AFRC PNDC. Some roots may be deeper than others. Some of the political parties may have more roots than others. But essentially, all the existing political parties have roots in the AFRC PNDC era. You see, in 1979, mid-1979, all the way up to the 1980s, one of the strongest advocates of AFRC rule was Professor Albert Edubuahim, who claimed that the principle of probity and accountability which had been introduced by the AFRC was an essential pursuit, essential principle in the building of a democratic Ghana. Now, many of you will remember Professor Dubois' boom speech in the early 1990s, which propelled him to stardom and which led to him becoming the presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party at the British Council Hall. Indeed, I was at that lecture. Professor Dubois was at pains to try and separate what he called egregious human rights abuses of the PNDC era from its pursuit of the principle of probity and accountability. So for him, as far as he was concerned, the PNDC was pursuing the principles of probity and accountability, which was admirable. But then the egregious human rights violations had soiled the PNDC's hands and so on. I was at the lecture, and I was quite surprised when this lecture, turned out to be what it was. Eventually, we all got to understand that it was General Anokwenu's response which gave that lecture the vein that it got. They said, we actually praised the PNDC for many things, except for its human rights record, you understand? So, it doesn't end there. As a matter of fact, in 1982, when the PNDC came into being following the coup and so on, the appointments it made were interesting, exceedingly interesting. Another presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party, John Agyapong, became the first PNDC Secretary for Local Government. The very first PNDC Secretary for Local Government was President J.A. Akufo. Dr. Obeda, who played a key role in the PNDC from its inception till its end, came from that stock. Indeed, he had become General Secretary of the measure of all opposition parties, which then became known as the, I think, All People's Party or something, So Dr. Obeda Samoa also came from that stock. Then it is interesting to note that a number of members of the PNDC itself came from the Dankwa Buzia stock. And I make bold to mention Alhaji Mahamadu Idrisu as ideologically and politically belonging to that stock. Eventually, when the PNDC got transformed into the NDC and so on, one of its very first chairpersons was Alhaji Isifu, who also came from that stock. General Nunu Mensah, a member of the PNDC, became the campaign manager of Nana Addo Akufo Addo. General Nunu Mensah, member of the PNDC, became the campaign manager. He organized the campaign of Nana Addo Akufo Addo. Then another star in the PNDC era, Major Korit Kwashiga, became the darling boy of the New Patriotic Party. He was the poster boy of the New Patriotic Party. And Major Korit Kwashiga was at the center of all the operations of the PNDC. Indeed, he was the chief operations officer of the PNDC. And he fitted into the Dankwa Buzia tradition without any problem. He was a star, he was a poster boy of the New Patriotic Party. And we have to remember that. When Nana Addo Akufo Addo became president, in 2017. Of all the people that you could have chosen as head of his personal security, who did he choose? Nana Addo Akufo Addo actually chose Captain Koda, who was a key figure in the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council. Very instructive. But it didn't end there. Before the elections of 2016, Nana Addo Akufo Addo paid a courtesy call to former President Jerry John Rawlings. And I'm sure you all remember what he said. In that meeting, Nana Addo Akufo Addo made it clear that former President Rawlings has always been his mentor. Don't forget. Nana Akufo Addo, flag bearer of the new Patriotic Party, said former President Rawlings had always been his mentor and that he had been inspired into politics. Wow. By people like Jerry John Rawlings. Should I say more? What about Rawlings, apart from his participation in June 4 and December 31st, could have inspired any politician, could have made him a mentor to Nana Addo Akufo Addo? Interesting. But you see, it's not over. My own good friend and comrade, John Indebugri. Wow, in the PNDC era, John Indebugri was something. He was a giant, heavyweight. Became regional minister for the upper region then. Became Minister of Agriculture. And in fact, if you see some of the early pictures, when Jerry Rawlings used to address crowds on Moaks and so on, you find Jerry Rawlings and Indebugri standing on the Moaks. John Indebugri became parliamentary candidate of the New Patriotic Party. And I can go on and on and on and on. But let me stop there. You see, I started by making the point that the PNDC legacy, bad as it may be, and I think that a lot of it is very, very bad, it's a shared legacy for all the political parties in Ghana. All, I mean all. You see, if you take the Convention People's Party, Eboteria was a member of the PNDC, Eboteria, from the CPP stock. Captain Chikata himself, head of national security with responsibility for foreign affairs, came from the CPP stock. Indeed, remained in the CPP family until his exit. And it's interesting also to remind ourselves that when Nana Addo Akufo Addo won elections as the presidential candidate of the New Patriotic Party, amongst the few people he saluted for helping him to be victorious was Captain Chikata. He paid special tribute to Captain Chikata for his advice and help in becoming President of the Republic of Ghana. What is Captain Chikata beyond PNDC? What help did he give Nana Akufo Addo? Up to now, we don't know. We can't even tell whether indeed Nana Akufo Addo was speaking the truth or not. But the truth is that in his, I think, inaugural statement, he made reference to the tremendous assistance he had received from Captain Chikata in becoming President of the Republic. Then there is Obi Amankwa, who at the time was General Secretary of the Kwame Nkrumah Revolutionary Guards and a leading light in the PNP of Dr. Liman and so on, who became a key part of the PNDC regime to the extent that he was actually appointed as Ghana's ambassador to China. Okay? There is John Tetega, a trade union stalwart, key CPP figure, and so on. KSP Jantwa, Johnny F.S. Hansen, Yeboah, who became PNDC Secretary for Labour, and so on. I can't go on. Ato Forson, and so on. I can continue without end. You know. Interestingly, if you come to the PNC, you would find elements who also served in the PNDC regime, who actually became the foundation of the PNDC. And one of them is Johnny Ndebugri again, a founding member of the PNC. Not just a founding member, somebody who contributed financially and materially to the establishment of the PNC and so on. And we can go on and on and on and on. So I insist that this legacy of the AFRC and PNDC is a shared legacy. Okay? And whatever went wrong in the PNDC era and in the AFRC era cannot be heaped on the National Democratic Congress without some people in the other political establishments and political parties sharing in that responsibility. But you see, Sana, it is interesting. And I'm not going to say it all, but I'll say part of it. Today's National Democratic Congress is also led by elements of the darko tradition, some of the people today who are playing leading roles in the NDC today as key ministers and so on came from the NPP, not just its tradition, but from the party. And there are so many names. I would mention one to start with. Today, Dr. Mani Bawumia is Minister of Defense, one of the three key ministers in this administration. Where did he come from? I know how he entered the NDC. You see, I think it was in the second term of President Akufo when prices were running helter-skelter, especially of fuel and so on. And we decided to set up the Committee for Joint Action. So at the meeting, I argued that what was happening was something which worried even people in the NPP. And therefore it was important to get those people in the NPP to speak out. And that it to be more credible than those who were known to be stout opponents of the Akufo administration and so on. So I was tasked to find somebody like that. At the time, Dr. Mani Bawumia, as president of the National Union of Ghana Students, was under attack by the NPP and had been drawn into a fight with the NPP. So I suggested Dr. Mani Bawumia. And I was asked to bring him and to make him read the first statement of the Committee for Joint Action. That is how Dr. Mani Bawumia eventually became a member of the NDC and has risen to the very top. And there are many others. So many others. And if you check the record of the contest for the leadership of the student movement you find many answers there. I want to leave it at Dr. Manibwa because he himself has made this public, and so it is public knowledge. But there are many leaders in the NDC today whose roots are from the NPP. I'm not even talking about the Danko Abuzia tradition, I'm talking about the NPP. Okay. Be that as it may, today, if you are to judge every action by political parties on the basis of their history, who would look at the New Patriotic Party twice? There is a story which is told by Dr. Tony Edu, and Dr. Tony Edu is still alive. As a child, how he saw vigilantes of the UP tradition capture a woman, spread her legs apart, and pound her private part with mortar until she bled to death. That's part of our history. Is this less gruesome than the murder of the judges? I find the murder of the judges most repugnant, unacceptable, something we should not condone and justify. There's no justification for it. But the capture of a woman, the pounding of her private parts with mortar until she bled to death, is that not as gruesome as the murder of the judges? Or perhaps more gruesome? Look, the bomb explosions in the Accra Sports Stadium, which killed innocent children, not adults, children were killed as a result of these bomb explosions. Do we constantly have to make reference to these incidents in our history? Do we? The bombing of the residents of Nkrumah near Malata Market. Are we to constantly be making reference to it? The Kolumbugu bombing, are we to be constantly making reference to it and so on? Should that become reason for all the things that we do today and so on? I think that, look, history is important. We have to learn the lessons of history. But you see, when we twist history, we abuse it. We don't apply its lessons. And in any case, whatever we want to use history for, I believe firmly that history ought to be true history.
Thanks for watching. Like and share the video. You can also drop your comment. Please don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell to turn on the notification.